Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Florence. This morning I'm going to take you to a place called Palazzo Davanzati. And this museum is very unusual because it's an old building, a house, a private house, that was built in the 1300s, used as exactly as they were supposed to use them in the 1300s, as a workshop, a bottega we call it, so they sold the things that they were making, and as a private house. And so you can see how people lived and begin to visualize the city in the 1300s. Then we'll be moving over to Piazza della Signoria, and then we'll be moving over to Santa Croce, which is a building, a church that was built in the 1200s, and it was, the facade on it was done in the 1800s. And so Florence was a center of interaction of all different kinds for culture and all the artistic developments, for the building developments, for the new things that were being invented for sale and so forth. And so Florence, until 1492, was really the, let's say, the pivot around which all European, at least the Florentines like to think so, around which European history and culture in particular rotated around. When 1492 came along, Columbus went and discovered America, and he left for this discovery from Spain. The same year, Lorenzo the Magnificent dies, and the whole history of Florence changes. The center of art moves to Rome and eventually to France, and Florentine history becomes interesting for the collections. Now we're going to start off now with a very ancient house. So you'll start at the beginning, and then we'll, as we go through the city, we'll see other things, okay?
Yeah, right.
Last night they were open till like 2:30.
All right, now notice from the outside, it's called Palazzo Davanzati. However, the coat of arms on the front is from the family Davanzati, but the building was built actually in the 1300s by the Davizi family. And you'll notice in Palazzo Davanzati that they're whole apartments. They could be divided easily into apartments, and they were, because the father lived on one floor, the first son lived on another floor with his family, and the head of the house, remember, in these old families was always the oldest male member. It's most commonly known as Palazzo Davanzati, after the name of the second owners. And it's on the ground floor with these openings. They had their workshop. Actually, it wasn't a workshop in this case. It was a regular shop where they sold their wool. And then on the first floor above the ground, there you see the windows. This is actually one of the first palaces in Florence to have glass windows. And are you all in here? Now, this is the inside, obviously, of Palazzo Davanzati. When you came through these doors, which you noticed are studded with nails, they're reinforced, the wood is reinforced with the nails. Then you come into the private part of the house that belongs to the family. Now we're in this courtyard. I would like you to notice that the staircase, first of all, goes all the way up, all the way to the top on the inside of the courtyard. All the apartments, all the rooms are on the inside walls off these staircases. Notice also that the plumbing comes down from the ceiling. Now we're going to go up. Also notice as we go up the stairs, because I'm going to try to take you, it's like climbing a mountain, I'm going to try to take you to the top floor first, because when we get there we can look at the kitchen first, and then we can easily walk down, and it's a little bit easier for us. The first floor above the ground, I said, was where the head of the household had his apartment. Now we'll go real slowly. So now, ladies and gentlemen, this is the kitchen, and the kitchens were usually located on the top floors, and they were located here for specific reasons. One, so that the fumes could go out the window. Two, because the servants lived on the top floors. Three, because they wanted to keep the odors and the noise of the people working in the kitchen away from the rest of the family. And they had, in this case, a dumbwaiter that goes up and down. They could put other things on besides for the water, and they could get the food either down the stairs quickly to the dining rooms, which are all located on the floors below this room. They didn't have to worry about drafts at that time because there were enough of them, so the fires burned easily. Because, you know, to keep a fire going, it's necessary that it has oxygen all the time. Notice also that the cupboards are set into the walls, and then on the other side you just have a simple cupboard, and the director of the museum has placed objects in these cupboards so that you can see more or less how these shelves and the different things were used. The furniture in this room is not furniture of the 1300s. It's furniture from different periods, but Italian, and most of them are very authentic antiques, very authentic in the sense that they're all original pieces, whereas on occasion it's possible that the top of the table and the bottom of the table weren't born together maybe. But in this museum, they're all supposed to be, or many of them are very, very unusual pieces. So as we go down the different floors, you will see many, many magnificent antiques. All right, this lamp on the ceiling, this is an oil lamp, you hear, and it's on a ring, and they look like Aladdin's lamp. So this is how they lit up. They had candles, of course. They had a table like this in the room someplace. And notice that on one corner here, it has, it's gouged out a bit. This is probably where they chopped up all the things that you need in the basic Italian recipes. For example, the garlic and the rosemary and the sage, you would chop all together to make a fine powder to put in the roast. Or you have, you would chop up the different ingredients like the carrots and the celery and so forth, and the onions to go in a sauce of some kind, or what the giblets or whatever that you happen to be making. They used juniper already for many of the recipes, and so that is probably where on this table they chop things. Okay, now let's go down to the next floor, and then we get to the best last. Now we'll go through these rooms in this order so that we see then the dining room, what would have been the dining room. We'll see the bathrooms and the bedroom. In the middle of the room here, we have a very large table. It doesn't seem big because it's the size of the room, but it's a very large table. And on it, we have a very interesting collection of ceramic hand warmers. I don't know why they're shaped like shoes, but they're hand warmers. They filled them with hot water, and then they could hold them in their hands to keep their hands warm. Then the table, by the way, is an Italian table from, I believe, the 1500s. It has the foot of the lion, and it has the head of a ram. And as you can see, after the 1400s, the furniture became much more sculptural. The ceiling is decorated. It's a wooden ceiling, and that's always decorated because in the 1300s, people had a horror of empty, undecorated spaces. So they wanted the churches, they wanted their houses to be decorated. And then as we move down, notice the hooks on the walls. because these hooks were used for hanging tapestries or very beautiful materials. And in some cases, the families would commission velvets or silks or whatever, woven especially for a room to be hung, so that when they had holidays or they had invited people into their homes, then they could hang these tapestries up on the walls and make the room very decorated. It also served for warmth, because these being stone walls, they can be very cold in the winter, and it takes a long time for them to heat up, as it takes a while for them to cool down, because in the summer these buildings are generally very cool and very comfortable, as a matter of fact. Now, at the end of the room we have what we call a credenza, and in this particular credenza you find examples of Italian ceramics, not from the 1300s, but from the 16 and 1700s. And then on the other end of the room, we have a very, very unusual and important family tree. And it's of the Davanzati family, and it was found by an antique dealer in Venice, and one of the Florentine families bought it for this palace. And it was made for this palace, and it shows all of the family members of the Davanzati, the second owners of the building. Then underneath is kind of a bench, and notice that it has the bench where you put your feet isn't just on the floor, because the floors were cold. And so when you sat on the bench, you could have your foot on something that was warmer. What I want to show you these are salt cellars here in the center, done in ceramics, and they're very interesting, as a matter of fact, but the elaborate decoration that you have for something as simple as a salt cellar tells you the consideration in which they held salt. Look at the chairs, the different styles, but also look at the chests, because they have a very fine and very vast collection of chests of all different kinds. Painted ones, this is worked in inlaid wood. They have carved ones. Now this would have been a bedroom. Now this is another example of a hope chest. This is a very elaborate bedroom. And the ceiling has been painted, the walls have been frescoed, and the frescoes in this room tell us a story of a lady in a castle, and her husband goes off to war, and another gentleman comes along and makes some visits, and then pretty soon the husband comes back and finds them and sends them all away. You have to pick out the different scenes. And so they show the different scenes of this romance around on the ceiling. Then the walls are painted also with make-believe tapestries. And we have a fireplace in the corner. You have steps to go up to the windows, and you have, again, another design in the terracotta brick floors. Now, the bed is a canopy bed. You find canopy beds in homes in the 1400s, but they're usually very simple. This is rather elaborate, so it comes from the 1500s at least. This is an example of a cradle. And then in the corner over there, you have a bathroom. Okay, now let's go down and look at the... All right, now here I want to point out, again, notice the ceiling and the floors, the different designs. But what I particularly want to show you here is these openings in the floors, because this being the first, this is the floor, this is the room that's above the workshop downstairs. However, if the enemy that is attacking the family breaks in, you notice that there was another doorway that was very strongly protected before the courtyard. So the family had a second chance of getting at their enemy by opening up these openings, and it goes directly down, and they could throw boiling oil or whatever they wanted down on the people that are coming in, because these are located over the doorways. So it was a way of defense. It was also a way that they could listen, if they wanted to what was going on downstairs. Because in the olden days, very rarely invited people into your homes, and you had open loggias on the ground floors. And they were open so that your neighbor wouldn't think you're plotting against him. And they were open, so it was just checks and balances against uprisings and plotting against your neighbor and in different parts economically or against the government. And so they were always trying to keep track of what was going on. And they were so afraid of having a dictatorship after they had become a free city, a city-state, that it was almost paranoia, the things that they were doing to make sure everything was going the way that they wanted it to do. Keep in mind that they elected their government every 2 months. And when you were in the government, you had to give up your family and your work and everything, and you only worried about the government. Now, you slept with all the other people in the government, you ate with all the other people in the government, you walked with them when they left the building, and for 2 months you were totally isolated with the government because you and 20 other people or 50 other people were part of the government. And so they would throw down ashes, whatever hot burning thing. Because she said the big doors were always open. Except at night, of course. So this was a way of protecting. Through these other, because we get distracted. Now this room is called the room of the pappagallo, or the parrot, because it's the design, the bird is in the design of these make-believe tapestries that we have on the walls. And here you also have like a loggia painted up on top with different kinds of trees that were native of this area. The citrus fruit trees, the the palm trees, and so forth, all the way around. Notice that there is a very big fireplace here. And this was certainly the head of the family room of the head of the household. Okay? Okay? We will be going now outside, and when we get to the street, we turn right. And we're going to be going up to Piazza of the Signoria. We will be going by what is called the straw market. It's going up there now. Okay, now. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Piazza of the Signoria, and the Signoria was the government that I was talking to you about a few minutes ago. In the Signoria, when Florence became a city-state and when they made their own government and no longer under the rule of the emperor, they built this building over here, which is the town hall, Palazzo Vecchio. You notice that it's built like a fortress, because that's the kind of building that they were building before Palazzo Davanzati. And it was built in a very strong way with this brugnato on the bottom and all the way up. Whereas in a private house, you see these rough stones just on the bottom level and the smoother stones on the upper level. As this buildings become more airy and more social, let's say, because they wanted to be more comfortable and have more light in the building and look out over the city in a new way, open up to the new events. The loggia was the public loggia for the people to gather in. In the front part of the loggia, there are statues that are called freestanding statues. Both the Rape of the Sabines by John Bologna of the second half of the 1500s and the famous Perseus by Cellini in bronze are statues that were made especially for these two places. And they were made especially to be looked at from all points of view so that you could walk around it. So they have to be balanced aesthetically and physically. And so they can be seen from all the way around. Now, this statue here was extremely modern because the sculptor, John Bologna, did not want in any way for it to have a name. He wanted you to see something and appreciate his talents of being able to carve something perfectly balanced and harmonic, and something that would go right under this arch. And so he makes it in such a way that the energy builds up and around and around and around, and then the energy is released through the fingers of the hands of the female figure. Your eyes look at the arch, then like a waterfall, your eyes fall down and you see the little lions on each side, and you look at the statue again. And it was revolutionary. It was the very first time anything like this had been done. But the citizens of Florence felt that this was too modern. And so they named it, and they named it the Rape of the Sabines, because the Sabines were the first tribe of people to be captured by the Romans as the Romans began expanding from Rome to found the Roman Empire. Okay, now ladies and gentlemen, this is the statue by a man called Benvenuto Cellini. He also was doing this at the second half of the 1500s, and it's a freestanding figure. It's in bronze, and Benvenuto Cellini wrote his own autobiography, which you can still buy in a bookstore. It's called The Autobiography of Benvenuto Cellini, and he was so involved with his own self that he wrote the book probably to tell the story of the casting of this statue, because it was very dramatic. He said he was very sick, it was raining, he was running out of materials, and it was quite a drama. And so he was very proud of it when he got it finished, because it's the first time he had ever cast in bronze. He was a silversmith, you remember. All right, now the statues that are outside here are Hercules and Caco. The story of Hercules and Caco is by Baccio Bandinelli. He was a very important artist in the 1500s. He was the official sculptor before Cellini for Cosimo I Grand Duke. Then we have a copy of the David. The original David was by Michelangelo. This is a copy of 1910 by an artist in Florence. And it's a copy of the original David, and that's where the original David was standing. And then further on we have a marble work by Almanati, and it's a fountain. It's called the Neptune Fountain. And the Florentines like to say, "Oh, Almanati, Almanati, what a beautiful white piece of marble you managed to ruin," because they don't like it very much, because it's what we call mannerism, and it's distorting the figure, not because of the stress on the body the way Michelangelo would have done it, but it's distorting to be different. So you couldn't put a pair of blue jeans on him and have the waist in the right spot. It's the waistline, you would be a little bit uncertain. His hip is too high, the arms are too long, and so forth. All right, now let's go inside the building, and if it's possible, because I see today some men in costume, and they're going to sound their trumpets, and they are all dressed like the old guards that we had in the city. There's a wedding today. Oh, today is Saturday. Oh, because now wait, there is a special agreement between Florence and Japan, and there is a special tourist I don't want to say tourist, but for people, Japanese people that want to be married in Florence, there is a special agreement and a special ceremony that they have so that they can come here to be married in the town hall. And so this is one of the first weddings of this sort to take place. This is why we have all the fanfare around. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, Now, this is the inner courtyard of the town hall, Palazzo Vecchio, the old palace. And originally, it had no decorations in it whatsoever. And then in the 1500s, for the wedding of the first son of the Grand Duke to get married, Francesco I, it was decorated. He married a girl from Austria. And so the walls are painted with scenes from Austrian cities. Then the columns are decorated with stucco and gold, and the decorations are also in the grotesque style. So this is gold leaf, and if they were cleaned up, you can imagine that they would be quite magnificent, because they are still even today. We have a fountain. This is a copy, and it's called a puto. And it is this is a copy of the one by Verrocchio. And so it's a very interesting little fountain, because it's been also taken as on the wine bottles for Puto Chianti wine. So you find it there, okay? Okay, now ladies and gentlemen, this is called Piazza San Firenze. It's a very, very interesting piazza, especially today, because we went to a medieval house and you got the flavor of how people lived. Now you're prepared to see something else. For example, the building behind me, the one with the tall tower, do you see the square tower? Now that's the kind of building as a real fortress that they built in the 1200s, before the building that we went into. Then in the 1300s, when they were building the building that we went into, Palazzo Davanzati, they built tall spires like this on the churches. And then that's 13. Then in the 1400s, they built the cathedral. They built the dome of the cathedral that you can see beyond, with all the people at the top. And then in the late 1400s, the early 1500s, 1490 to be exact, they built this building here. It's an example of Renaissance architecture. Okay, now ladies and gentlemen, this is Piazza Santa Croce, and Santa Croce means Holy Cross. And so this is the Church of the Holy Cross. It was built outside the city walls at the end of the 1200s for the Franciscan religious order. And it was built all in stone, and it was built with a very large piazza in front, or square, so that the people could gather around to hear the different monks talk when they had a big gathering of people. This is the inside of the Church of the Holy Cross Church, inside of Santa Croce, and in it we have buried many famous people. All right, now this is the tomb of Michelangelo, and it was sculptured by Vasari in the second half of the 1500s, Giorgio Vasari, and it is representing the figure of the bust of Michelangelo on the top of the tomb. And then we have painting, sculpture, and architecture are the three figures around it, the three female figures around it. Now, another famous person buried in this church is Machiavelli, Nicola Machiavelli, and he's buried right over here in this tomb. In 1564, a man called Galileo was born. And when Galileo died, he was buried on the exactly opposite side of the building. And these two chapels have been decorated by the very famous painter Giotto, Giotto. And he is the painter who in the 12 and early 1300s translated the Byzantine type Greek painting, we call it, into Latin. In other words, he translated the kinds of, if you think of a Greek or a Russian icon, he transformed that type of painting into a more natural looking painting. And so then what he does is to turn the heads of the people and the bodies toward the main subject, and he has them frown or smile or whatever And then by blending the colors so that the figures go from dark to light and dark to light, it suggests volume underneath the capes. It suggests real people underneath the dresses.
Construction of this great church was begun in the year 1294, and it was planned to be one of the largest churches in the world. It was designed by the important medieval Italian architect named Arnolfo di Cambio, who also designed the nearby Palazzo Vecchio and the Great Duomo, the main cathedral of Florence. All three of these important structures were begun at about the same time at the end of the 13th century. You see everywhere the rich decorations inside Santa Croce, the paintings, the funeral monuments, the statues, the embellishments, all of which represent a great contradiction to the original intentions of the Franciscan order, which was based on vows of poverty. And ironically, much of the funding came from the rich banking families, the Bardis, the Peruzzis, the Medicis of Florence, who were making their money by loaning out funds at extremely exorbitant interest rates, which in itself was a sinful act. So to atone for their usurious business practices, they donated extra money to the church. This cleansed their soul while enhancing their fame and power. So it's quite interesting to visit Santa Croce and soak in some of that rich history.